Hi, I'm Maria Elena Andrade Partido from University Palo de la Vida. I'm doing Sociology and Political Sciences, and I'm going to talk about the Red Record, written by Ida B. Wells and published in 1895. Well, first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about her life. Then I'm going to read the first chapter, the case stated. Then I'm going to read the remedy, the last of her chapters. And in between, I'm going to make some comments about the chapters. Well, Ida B. Wells was an incredible woman. She was a teacher in a school for black people in Rust College, Holly Springs. She also published a column in Memphis Free Speech newspaper that she owned after a while. On 9th March in 1892, she printed an article condemning the lynching of three friends of her due to they were accused of raping three white women. This article drew mad lots of men, and she was forced to leave the city because of the threats. Besides, she supported a Civil Rights Act of 1875, a law against race discrimination. One of her phrases that defines her fighter spirit is, "One had better die fighting against injustice than to die like a dog or a rat in a trap." Well, we can't deny her magnificent work and commitment with the cause, and she even received a posthumous special citation in 2020 for being a pioneer in the investigation journalism, which allowed her to document hundreds of cases of lynching because of race. In fact, this is what she wrote in the Red Record. Here there is a photo of one of her great-grandson accepting the special citation from Columbia University President Lee Boligny on behalf of his family. And well, now I'm going to read the first chapter, the case stated, and I have chosen the case stated because it gives us a general view of the lynching problem, as you will see and listen. The student of American sociology will find the year 1894 marked by a pronounced awakening of the public conscience to a system of anarchy and autocracy which had grown during a series of 10 years to be so common that scenes of unusual brutality failed to have any visible effect upon the human sentiments of the people of our land, beginning with the emancipation of the Negro, the inevitable result of unbridled power exercised for 2.5 centuries by the white man over the Negro, began to show itself in acts of conscienceless robbery during the slave regime. The Southern white man owned the Negro body and soul. It was to his interest to dwarf the soul and preserve the body, best with unlimited power over his slave to subject him to any and all kinds of physical punishment. The white man was still restrained from such punishment as tended to injure the slave by abating his physical powers and thereby reducing his financial worth. While the slaves were scourged mercilessly, and in countless cases humanely, treated in other respects. Still, the white owner rarely permitted his anger to go so far as to take a life, which would entail upon him a loss of several $100s. The slave was rarely killed. He was too valuable. It was easier and quite as effective for discipline or revenge to sell him down south. But emancipation came, and the vested interests of the white man in the Negro's body were lost. The white man had no right to scourge the emancipated Negro, still less had he right to kill him. But the Southern white people had been educated so long in that school of practice, in which might makes right, that they descended to draw strict lines of action in dealing with the Negro. In slave times, the Negro was kept subservient and submissive by the frequency and severity of scourging, but with freedom. A new system of intimidation came into vogue. The Negro was not only whipped and scourged, he was killed. Not all nor nearly all the murders were done by white men. During the past 30 years in the South have come to light, but the statistics as gathered as and preserved by white men and which have not been questioned show that during these years more than 10,000 Negroes have been killed in cold blood without the formality of judicial trial and legal execution, and yet as evidence of the absolute impunity with which the white man dares to kill a Negro, the same record shows that during all these years and for all these murders only 3 white men have been tried, convicted, and executed. As non-white men have been lynched for the murder of colored people. These 3 executions are only instances of the death penalty being visited upon white men for murdering Negroes. Naturally enough, the commission of these crimes began to toll upon the public conscience, and the Southern white man, as a tribute to the 19th century civilization, was in manner compelled to give excuses for his barbarism. His excuses have adapted themselves to the emergency, and are aptly outlined by the great of all Negroes, Frederick Douglass, in an article of recent date in which he shows that there have been 3 distinct eras of Southern barbarism, to account for which 3 distinct excuses have been made. The first excuse given to the Civil War was the murder of unoffending Negroes was the necessity of white men to repress and stamp out alleged race riots. For years immediately succeeding the war there was an appalling slaughter of colored people, and the wires usually conveyed to the North people and the world the intelligence. First, that an insurrection was being planned by Negroes, which a few hours later would prove to have been vigorously resisted by white men, and controlled with a resulting loss of several killed and wounded. It was always a remarkable feature in these insurrections and riots that all Negroes were killed during the rioting, and that all the white men escaped unharmed. From 1865 to 1872, hundreds of colored men and women were mercilessly murdered, and the almost invariable reason assigned was that they met their death by being alleged participants in an insurrection or a riot. But this history at least wore itself out. No insurrection ever materialized, no Negro rioter was ever apprehended and proven guilty, and no dynamite ever recorded the black man's protest against oppression and wrong. It was too much to ask thoughtful people to believe this transparent story, and the Southern white people at last made up their minds that some of the excuse must be had. Then came the second excuse, which had its birth during the turbulent times of Reconstruction. By an amendment to the Constitution, the Negro was given the right of franchise, and theoretically at least, his blood became his invaluable emblem of citizenship. In a government of the people for the people and by the people, the Negro's vote became an important factor in all matter of states and national politics, but this did not last long. The Southern white man will not consider that the Negro had any right which a white man was bound to respect, and the idea of a republican form of government in the Southern states grew into general contempt. It was maintained that this is a white man's government, and regardless of number, the white man should rule. No Negro domination became the new legend of the sanguinary banner of the Sunny South. and under it rode the Ku Klux Klan, the regulators, and the lawless mobs, which for any cost chose to murder one man or a dozen as suited their purpose the best. It was a long, gory campaign. The blood chills, and the heart almost loses faith in Christianity. When one thinks of Yazoo, Hamburg, Edgefield, Copiah, and the countless massacre of defenseless Negroes, whose only crime was the attempt to exercise the right to vote. But it was a bootless strife for corrupt people. The government, which had made the Negro a citizen, found itself unable to protect him. It gave him the right to vote, but denied him the protection which should have maintained that right. Scourged from his home, hunted through the swamps, hung by midnight raiders, and openly murdered in the light of day, the Negro clung to his right of franchise with an heroism which would have wrung admiration from the hearts of savages. He believed that in small white ballot there was a subtle something which stood for manhood as well as citizenship, and thousands of brave black men went to their graves, exemplifying the one dying for the other. The white man's victory soon became complete by fraud, violence, intimidation, and murder. The franchise vouchsafed to the Negro grew to be barren ideality, and regardless of number, the colored people found themselves voiceless in the councils of those whose duty it was to rule, with no longer the fear of the Negro domination. Before their eyes, the white man's second excuse became valueless. With the Southern governments all subverted and the Negro actually eliminated from all participation in state and national elections, there could be no longer an excuse for killing Negroes to prevent Negro domination. Brutality still continued. Negroes were whipped, scourged, exiled, shot, and hung wherever and wherever it pleased the white men so to treat them. And as the civilized world, with increasing persistency, held the white peoples of the South to account for its outlawry, the murderers invented the third excuse, that Negroes had to be killed to avenge their assault upon women. There could be framed no possible excuse more harmful to the Negro and more unanswerable, if true, in its sufficiency for the white man. Humanity abhors the assailant of womanhood, and this charge upon the Negro at once placed him beyond the pale human sympathy. With such unanimity, earnestness, and apparent candor was this charge made and reiterated, that the world has accepted the story of the Negroes is a monster, which the Southern white man has painted. And today, this Christian world feels that while lynching is a crime, and lawlessness and anarchy the certain precursors of nations' fall, it cannot by word or deed extend sympathy or help to a race of outlaws, who might mistake their plea for justice, and deem it excuse for their continued wrongs. The Negro has suffered so much, and is willing to suffer more. He recognized that the wrongs of 2 centuries cannot be righted in a day, and he tries to bear his burden with patience for today and be hopeful for tomorrow. But there comes a time when the various one will turn, and the Negro, and not now, defend his name and manhood from this vile accusation. He will be unworthy even the contempt of mankind. It is to this church he now feels he must make answer. In the Southern people, in defense of their loneliness, will tell the truth and admit that colored men and women are lynched for almost any offense, from murder to misdemeanor. There will not be the necessity for this defense, but when they intentionally, maliciously, and constantly believe the record and bolster up this falsehood by the words of legislators, preachers, governors, and bishops, then the Negro must give to the world his side of the awful story. A word as to the Church itself in considering the third reason assigned by the certain white people for the battery of blacks. The question must be asked: what the white man means when he charges the black with rape? Does he mean the crime which is statute of the civilized states described as such? Not by any means. With southern white man, any mesalliance existing between white woman and a colored man is a sufficient foundation for a charge of rape. The southern white man says that it is impossible for a voluntary alliance to exist between a white woman and a colored man, and the very fact of an alliance is a proof of force. In numerous instances where colored men have been lynched or charged of rape, it was positively known at the time of lynching and indisputably proven after victim's death that the relationship sustained between men and women was voluntary and clandestine, and that in no court of law will even be in the charge of assault have been successfully maintained. It was for the assertion of this fact in the defense of her own race that the writer hereof became an exile, her property destroyed and returned to her home forbidden under penalty of death, for writing the following editorial, which was printed in her paper, The Free Speech in Memphis, 10 May 21, 1892. 8 Negroes lynched since last issue of Free Speech, one at Little Rock, Ark, last Saturday morning, where the citizens broke into a penitentiary and guarded their men, 3 near Aniston, LA, and 1 near New Orleans, and 3 at Clarksville, the last 3 for killing a white man, and 5 of the same old racket, the new alarm about raping white women. The same program of hanging, then shooting bullets into the lifeless bodies, was carried out to the letter. Nobody in this section of the country believes the old threadbare lie that Negro men rape white women. In Southern white men are not careful, they will overreach the self and the public sentiment will have a reaction. A conclusion will be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women. But threats cannot suppress the truth, and while the Negro suffers the soul deformity resultant from 2.5 centuries of slavery, he is no more guilty of his vilest of all valid charges than the white man who would have blackened his name. During all these years of slavery, no such charge was ever made, not even during the dark days of the rebellion, when the white men, following the fortunes of war, went to do the battle for the maintenance of slavery, while the master was away fighting to forge the fetters upon the slave. He left his wives and children with no protectors save the Negroes themselves. And yet during those years of trust and peril no Negro proved recreant to his trust, and no white man returned to a home that had been despoiled. Likewise, during the period of alleged insurrection and alarming race riots, it never occurred to a white man that his wife and children were in danger of assault, nor in the Reconstruction era, where the hue and the cry was against the Negro domination. Was there ever a thought that the domination would ever contaminate a Pharisee to strike to death the virtue of womanhood? It must appear strange indeed to every thoughtful and candid man that more than a quarter of a century elapsed before the Negro began to show signs of such infamous degeneration. In his remarkable apology for lynching, Bishop Haygood of Georgia says, "No race, not the most savage, tolerates the rape of women. But it may be said with a reflection upon any other people that the Southern people are nowadays always have been most sensitive concerning the honor of their women, their mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters. It is not the purpose of its defense to say one word against the white women of the South. Such need not to be said. But it's their misfortune that the chivalrous white men of that section, in order to escape the deserved execration of the Civil War, should shield themselves by their cowardly and infamous false excuse, and call into question that very honor about which they distinguished Presley apologists claim that they are more sensitive. To justify their own barbarism, they assume a chivalry which they do not possess. True chivalry respects all womanhood, and no one who reads the record as it is written in the faces of the million mulattoes in the South will for a minute conceive that the Southern white men had a very chivalrous regard for the honor due to women of his own race, or respect the womanhood which circumstances placed in his power. That chivalry which is most sensitive concerning the honor of women, can hope but a little respect from the civilized world, when it confines itself entirely to women who happen to be white. Virtue knows no color line, and the chivalry which depends upon complexion of skin and textured hair can command no honest respect. When the emancipation came to Negroes, there arose in the northern part of the United States an almost divine sentiment among the noblest, purest, and best women of the North, who felt called to a mission to educate and Christianize the millions of Southern ex-slaves. From every nook and corner of the North, brave young white women answered to that call and left their culture, homes, their happy associations, and their lives of ease, and with heroic determination went to the South to carry light and truth to the benighted blacks. It was a heroism no less than which calls for volunteers for India, Africa, and the Isles of the Sea, to educate their unfortunate churches, to teach them the Christian virtues, and to inspire them the moral sentiments manifest in their own lives. The young women braved dangers whose records read more like fiction than fact. They became social outlaws in the South. The peculiar sensitiveness of the Southern white men for women never shed a protecting influence about them. No friendly word from their own race cheered them in their work. No hospitable door gave them a companionship like that from which they had come. No chivalrous white man doffed his hat in honor to respect. They were nigger teachers, unpardonable offenders in their social ethics of the South, and were insulted, persecuted, and ostracized, not by Negroes, but by the white manhood which boasts of chivalry toward women. And yet, these northern women worked on year after year unselfishly, with an heroism which amounted almost to martyrdom, threading their way through the dense forest, working in schoolhouse, in the cabin, and in the church, thrown at all times, in all places, among the unfortunate and lowly Negroes, whom they had come to find and to serve. The North women, thousands and thousands of them, have spent more than a quarter of a century in giving the colored people their splendid lessons, for home and heart and soul, without protection, save what which innocence gives to every good woman. They went about their works, fearing no assault and suffering none. Their chivalrous protectors were hundreds miles away in the northern homes, and they never fear any dark-faced mobs. They dare neither they go beyond their own roof trees. They never complain of assaults, and no mob was ever called to insistence to avenge crimes against them. Before the world adjudged the Negro a moral monster, a vicious assailant of womanhood, and a menace to the sacred precincts of home, the colored people as the consideration of silent record of gratitude, respect, protection, and devotion of the millions of the race in the South. To the southern of northern white women who have served as teachers and missionaries since the war, the Negro may not have known the Calvary was, but he knew enough to preserve and violate the womanhood of the South which was entrusted to his hand during the war. The fine sensibilities of his soul may have been crushed out by years of slavery, but his heart was full of gratitude to white women of the North, who blessed his home, inspired his soul, and in all these years of freedom, faithful to his trust in both of these instances. He should not have partial ear to civilist war, where he dares to speak for himself and is against the infamy wherewith he stands charged. It is his regret that his own defense he must disclose to the world that the dehumanizing brutality which fixes upon America the blood of national crime. Whatever faults and failings other nations may have in their dealings with their own subjects or with other people, no other civilized nation stands condemned before the world with a series of crimes so peculiarly national. It becomes a painful duty of the Negro to reproduce a record which shows that a large portion of the American people above anarchy condone murder and defy the contempt of civilization. These pages are written in no spirit of vindictiveness, for all who give the subject consideration must concede that far too serious in the condition of the civilized government in which the spirit of unrestrained outrage constantly increases in violence and casts its blight over a continually growing area of territory. We plead not to the colored people alone, but for all victims of the terrible injustice which puts men and women to death without form of law. During the year 1894 were 132 persons executed in the United States by due form of law, while in the same year 197 persons were put to death by mobs who gave the victim no opportunity to make a lawful defense. No comment need to be upon the condition of public sentiment responsible for such alarming results. The purpose of the pages which allow should be to give the record which has been made, not by colored men, but that which is the result of compilations made by white men, of reports sent over the civil world by white men in the South. Out of their own mouths shall be murders be condemned. For a number of years, the Chicago Tribune, admittedly one of the leading journals of America, has made a specialty of the compilation of statistics touching upon lynching. The data compiled by that journal and published to the world January 1st, 1894, up the present time has not been disputed. In order to be safe from the charge of exaggeration, the incidents hereinafter reported have been confined to those vouched for by the Tribune. And well, after this chapter, she thoroughly informed us about the racism and the use of lynching as a way to control the black population using extreme violence. And now I'm going to jump into the last chapter, the 10th, and it's called The Remedy. This is the last one, and here after showing the great problem that her society was facing, she says what we should do. It was a well-established principle of law that every wrong has a remedy. Herein it rests of respect for law. The Negro does not claim that all of 1,000 black men, women, and children who have been hanged, shot, and burned alive during these past 10 years were innocent of the charge made against them. We had associated too long with the white man not to have copied his vices as well, and his virtues. But we do insist that the punishment is not the same for both classes of criminals. In lynching, opportunity is not given the Negro to defend himself against the unsupported accusations of white men and women. The word of an accuser is held to be true, and the excited, bloodthirsty mob demand that the rule of law be reversed, and instead of proving the accused to be guilty, the victim of their hate and revenge must prove himself innocent. No evidence he can offer will satisfy the mob. He is bound hand and foot into eternity. Then, to excuse its infamy, the mob almost invariably reports the monstrous falsehood that its victim made a full confession before he was hanged. With all military, legal, and political power in their hands, only two of the lynching states have attempted a check by exercising the power which is theirs. Major Trott of Roanoke, Virginia, called out the militia in 1893 to protect the Negro prisoner, and in so doing 9 men were killed and a number wounded. Then the major and militia withdrew, left the Negro off to his fate, and he was promptly lynched. The business men realized the blow to the towns were given light sentences, the highest being one of 12 financial interests, called the mayor home. The grand jury indicted and prosecuted the ringleaders of the mob. They mobbed in state prisons. He arrived at the penitentiary. He was pardoned by the governor of the state. The only other real attempt made by authority to protect a prisoner of the law, and which was more successful, was that Gov. McKinley of Ohio, who sent the militia to Washington Courthouse in October 1894, and 5 men were killed and 20 wounded in maintaining the principle that the law must be upheld. In South Carolina, in April 1893, Gov. Tillman aided the mob by yielding up to be killed, a prisoner of the law who had voluntarily placed himself under governor's protection. Public sentiment, its representative has encouraged lynch law, and upon the revolutions of sentiment we must depend for its abolition. Therefore, we demand a fair trial by law for those accused of crime, and punishment by law after honest conviction. No one's sympathy for criminal is solicited, but we do ask that the law shall punish all alike. We earnestly desire those that control the forces which make public sentiments to join with us in demands. Surely the humanitarian spirit of the country, which reaches out to denounce the treatment of Russian Jews, the Armenian Christians, the laboring poor people, the Siberian exiles, that the native women of India will not longer refuse to lift its voice on this subject. ever known that the cannibals or savage Indians have burned 3 human beings alive in the past 2 years. The whole of Christianhood will be roused to devise ways and means to put a stop to it. Can you remain silent and inactive when such things are done in your own community and country? Is your duty to humanity in the United States less binding? What can you do, reader, to prevent lynching, to thwart anarchy and promote law and order through all land? First, you can help disseminate the facts contained in this book by bringing them to knowledge of everyone of whom you come in contact, to the end that public sentiment may be revolutionized. Let the facts speak for themselves, with you as a medium. Second, you can be instrumental in having churches, missionary societies, YMCAs, WCTUs, and the old Christians and moral forces in connection with your relations and social life. Pass revolutions of condemnation and protest every time a lynching takes place, and see the axe sent to a place where these outrages occur. Third, bring the intelligent consideration of Southern people the refusal of capital to invest, where lawlessness and mob violence hold sway. Many labor organizations have declared by resolution that they will avoid lynch-infested localities and they will the pestilence when seeking new homes. If the South wishes to build up its waste place quickly, there is no better way than uphold the majesty of the law by enforcing obedience to the same and meting all the same punishment to all classless for criminals, white as well as black. Equality before law must become a fact as well as theory before America is truly the land of the free and the home of the brave. Fourth, think and act on independent lines in this behalf. Remember that after all, it's the white man's civilization and the white man's government which are on trial. This crusade will determine whether that civilization can maintain itself by itself, or whether anarchy shall prevail, whether this nation should write itself down as success at self-government, or in deepest humiliation admit its failure complete, whether the precepts and theories of Christianity are professed and practiced by American white people as golden rule of thought and action, and adopted as a system of moral to be preached to, hidden until they attain to intelligence which need the system of lynch law. Fifth, Congressman Blair offered a resolution in the House of Representatives August 1894. The organized life of the country can speedily make this a law by sending resolutions to Congress endorsing Mr. Blair's bill and asking Congress to create a commission. In no better way can the question be settled, and the reader does not fear the issue. The following is the resolution resolved by the House of Representatives and Senate in Congress assembled, that the Committee on Labor be instructed to investigate and report the number, location, and date of the alleged assault by mail upon females throughout the country during the 10 years last preceding the passing the joint resolution. For or on account on which organized but unlawful violence had been inflicted or attempted to be inflicted, but also as certain as report all facts organized but unlawful violence to the person, with their attendant facts and circumstances, which have been inflicted upon accused person alleged to have been guilty of crimes punishable by due process of law which have been taking place in any part of the country within the 10 years last preceding the passage of this resolution. Such investigations should be made by the usual methods and agencies of the Department of Labor, and report made to the Congress as soon as the work can be satisfactorily done, and the sum of 25,000 or so much thereof as may be necessary, is hereby appropriated to pay the expenses out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated. The belief has been constantly expressed in England that the United States, which has pronounced Lloyd Garrison, Henry Ward Beecher, James Russell Lowell, John G. Whittier, and Abraham Lincoln. There must be those who will talk the work of inaugurating an era of order. The colored people of this country who have been loyal to the flag believe the same, and strong their belief have begun to the crusade. To those who feel they have no obligation for the matter, we commend the following lines of Lowell of Freedom. And well, I have chosen also this phrase because for me, as a future sociology, it's really inspiring. What can I do to help the cause? People ask. The answer, according to E.W. Wells, always is tell the world the facts. And that is exactly what I will do as a sociologist.